Well, joining us live from Philadelphia to talk about the grieving process is Dr. Ann Rosen Spector, a clinical psychologist, and thanks for being on the program.
Thank you.
So how important is counseling in helping these families cope with this tragedy?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think that, at least what I've read, the CEO, Mr. Fernandez, has done a wonderful job of allocating resources and being on site himself to make sure that the family and the relatives get what they need.
One family has lost 7 members of their family. An entire family has been wiped out. Where do you even begin talking to the remaining survivors? And do you think some of these survivors may have survivor guilt?
Oh, I'm sure many of them do. It would be very hard for them to avoid that, but it isn't as if a counselor has magic words to take away all the pain. People have to talk through the issues and deal with the grief for as long as it takes. It's not a short-term process. It never is.
So many of these families are still in a state of shock. The reality of losing their lost ones will probably set in even more as days and weeks go by. Are there different stages of grief?
Not really. I mean, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did work many years ago, and people seem to think that that's absolutely true, but she described a hierarchy of grief and an invariant stages of grief, and that isn't actually what happens. People get it in waves, people get different stages concomitantly. It's just really, it's an impossible thing. You know, one day your life looks one way, and within a very short amount of time, huge pieces of your social fabric are ripped away. And there isn't any particular strategy that's going to make it make it easier for it to heal.
And what about faith, Ann? How important is that in all this?
It's extremely important, especially when people have funeral rites and rituals and have also a sense of the afterlife. It does help, but it doesn't help to erase the pain that they're going to have for a very long period of time. When you lose somebody that you love, especially in an instant like this, especially in a circumstance where you think it could have potentially been avoided, it's not something that you're ever going to really get over. You don't get over the loss of the people that you love.
And Ann, what about the children who have survived this tragedy, the children who have lost mothers and fathers and aunts or uncles? What is the best approach in dealing with children?
The best approach is to make sure that they're with people that they know very, very well, so that they have some sense of continuity and stability. And it's also very important, although a lot of people don't do it, to allow the children to talk about the myriad feelings that they have. Sometimes people think, especially with young children, it's better if we don't talk about it and we go on, but that's actually the wrong approach.
And some of these families are still holding out to a miracle that maybe some of their families and loved ones will be found alive. Is that healthy?
It almost doesn't matter whether it's healthy or not. It's just what people do. You know, it's very hard to think that something like this is real. And I'm sure, as in every other tragedy, that the people involved wake up every single morning and for a few seconds they're okay, and then they remember it wasn't a bad dream.
A bad dream, a nightmare, so much grief
Absolutely.
For these families. And what about the media coverage overall? Local media in Indonesia apparently showed bodies floating on the water, certainly not what these families needed to see.
You know, I don't know the answer of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for the families. Maybe they felt like seeing it made it more real. You know, of course, they were not required to watch the media coverage of it, but people want answers, people want explanations, people want something tangible. So showing the pictures is one way of giving it to people. But again, nobody is required to watch it, and I'm sure that there were some family members who chose not to.
Ann Rosen Spector, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.